Commander Jacob Pierce stood at the window of the exploration vessel, looking down at the planet below. 7 was not a friendly place. The atmosphere glowed with a sickly green color, and radiation storms moved across the surface like angry waves. Jacob had studied this planet for months. He knew what waited down there. He also knew that the Galactic Council did not believe humans could survive there. The ship's intercom crackled. Dr. Hayes, the team's biologist, spoke from the medical bay. "Jacob, the radiation suits are ready, but the readings are worse than last week. The levels will kill anything not protected within 3 hours." Jacob did not look away from the window. "Then we work fast." The council had sent an observer. His name was from the outer sectors, was tall with blue-gray skin that reflected light like polished stone. He wore the official robes of the Galactic Council, and his expression showed he did not want to be here. When Jacob entered the briefing room, was already seated, tapping his fingers on the metal table. "This mission is a waste of resources," said before Jacob could speak. "The radiation alone will destroy human tissue within hours. You know this, Commander. Every species that has tried to explore 7 has failed. Why should humans be different?" Jacob sat across from him and spread the mission files on the table. "Because we think differently than other species. We solve problems with our minds, not just our biology." "Biology matters," countered. "They have superior resistance to radiation. They can adapt their cellular structure in minutes. Your species has neither advantage. You are soft. You break easily." Lieutenant Foster entered the room. He was young, barely 30, with dark hair and a scar along his left cheek from a mission 3 years ago. Did not look impressed by his words. "Soft," said, pulling up a chair. "Last year, humans explored the ice moon of Vex 9 in temperatures that froze every other species solid. We did it without any special biology. We used our brains and determination." Waved his hand. "Individual cases, not relevant to this mission." Jacob raised his hand, stopping from responding. "You are here to observe. That is fine. But you should know that we are not asking for permission. We are going to 7, and we will find the artifact. You can either watch us succeed or explain to the council why you stayed on the ship." His blue-gray skin seemed to darken. He said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Dr. Aaron Cole was the last to arrive. Aaron was the team's environmental scientist and held 3 advanced degrees in planetary systems. He was older than Jacob by 5 years, with gray streaking his dark hair. Aaron always asked questions before accepting anything as fact. "The preliminary scans show something interesting," Aaron said, spreading new data across the table. "The radiation pattern is not natural. Something below is generating or amplifying it. If we can find the source and disable it, we might have more time than 3 hours." "That is exactly why we are going," Jacob said. "The ancient records suggest that whoever built this civilization knew how to control the radiation. They left behind technology. We find it, we understand it, and we use it." Leaned forward. "And if you do not find it, if you are wrong about the ancient technology?" "Then we die," Aaron said simply. "But we will have died trying to answer a question. That is what humans do. We try things, we fail sometimes. We learn, we try again. Other species wait for certainty before acting. That is why you are always waiting. Humans move forward anyway." 2 hours later, the team stood in the landing bay. The radiation suits were thick and clumsy, covered in layers of protection. The suits had cooling systems to keep the human body from overheating and filtration systems to protect the lungs. Checked each seal carefully. One mistake would be fatal. "Air supply is 4 hours," said to each team member as she checked them. "Heart rate monitors are active. If anyone's suit is compromised, we will know immediately. Get back to the shuttle. No exceptions." Tested the weapons system on his tactical suit. The radiation would damage electronics, but they had shielded everything. If they ran into hostile creatures, would be ready. Jacob stood with Aaron at the rear cargo door. Below, 7 waited. The radiation storms were visible even from this height, moving across the landscape like columns of fire. "You really think there is ancient technology down there?" Aaron asked. "I know there is," Jacob said. "The question is whether we are brave enough to find it." "Brave or crazy," Aaron said. "Sometimes they are the same thing," Jacob replied. The shuttle descended through the upper atmosphere. The radiation indicators climbed steadily. Yellow warning lights appeared on the control panels, then orange, then red, but the suits held. The filtration systems worked. The team was still alive. When they landed, the first thing they noticed was the silence. There was no wind, no sound, nothing. Just the hiss of their own breathing inside the helmets and the constant clicking of radiation counters. The ground was dark gray, covered with what looked like ash or dust. In the distance, mountains rose up against the sickly green sky. Stood in the shuttle doorway, watching them move across the surface. He did not leave the ship. He would watch from here, safe and protected. Jacob looked back at the shuttle, then at his team, was checking the radiation levels with a portable scanner, had his weapon ready, eyes scanning the horizon. Aaron was examining rock samples with a collection tool. "Stay together," Jacob commanded. "The artifact was last detected in the valley to the north. We move slowly and carefully, watch for anything unusual." They walked across the barren landscape for what felt like hours. The radiation grew worse. The suit's cooling system worked harder to keep Jacob's body temperature stable. His heart rate monitor showed the stress his body was under, but he did not stop. His team followed without complaint. The cavern system was massive. Jacob had expected a simple tunnel or cave. Instead, they found themselves in a structure that was clearly built, not natural. The walls were smooth and covered with symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. The team descended deeper, their suit lights cutting through the blackness. Then the earthquake hit. It was powerful and sudden. The ground shook violently and the team was thrown in different directions. Rocks fell from above. Jacob felt the impact as debris struck his suit. Around him, he heard the screams of his team members through the communication system. Then just as suddenly, the shaking stopped. Jacob tried to call out, "Status report, everyone respond." There was silence. He tried again more forcefully, "Aaron, anyone respond." Finally, Aaron's voice came through, weak and distorted. "Jacob, I am here, is with me. We can see you with our lights, but something is blocking our communication. We are separated." Jacob looked around. Above him, wherein Aaron had been standing, there was now a wall of collapsed rock. It was 10 meters high at least. The communication systems were damaged, probably by the electromagnetic surge from whatever caused the earthquake. "How bad is it?" Jacob asked. "We are on the upper passage," Aaron said. "I do not see. The last I remember, she was behind us. The collapse may have pushed her in a different direction." Jacob forced himself to think clearly. Panic would kill them faster than anything else. "Listen to me carefully. You two move back up toward the surface. Find stable ground and wait. I'm going to find, and then I will find a way to reach you." "Jacob, we should stay together," said, his young voice tight with fear. "We are separated," Jacob replied. "But we are not lost. There are other passages. The people who built this place did not design it with only one way out. We will find each other again. Just move up and stay safe." Jacob turned away from the collapsed section and moved deeper into the cavern. He called his name repeatedly, but there was no answer. The symbols on the walls continued to glow, creating strange patterns of light and shadow. Above the collapsed rocks, forced herself to breathe slowly. Her suit had taken damage when the earthquake threw her sideways. The right arm was partially torn and the filtration system was struggling. She was in a lower passage, deeper than where Jacob had gone. The radiation here was actually lower somehow. She did not understand why, but she was grateful for it. On the surface, watched the readings on the shuttle's monitors. The earthquake had destroyed the communication relay they had left at the landing site. Without that relay, he could not reach the team directly. He called the main ship in orbit. "The expedition team has lost contact," he reported to the commanding officer above. "An earthquake has separated them. The radiation levels are increasing. I estimate they have 4 hours before their suits fail completely." The commanding officer was a human named Captain Thomas. He had wanted to lead this expedition himself, but had been overruled because humans were considered unreliable for this mission. Now his team was in danger. "What do you recommend?" asked. Looked out at the green sky and the radiation storms in the distance. "Prepare for a final recovery of any remains. These humans have already exceeded expectations in survival time. They will not return alive." But climbing through the passages with slow, careful steps would not have agreed with his assessment. She knew Jacob. She had worked with him for 5 years. Jacob did not give up. Jacob did not accept defeat. If he was alive, he was already planning how to find her and reach the others. Deep below, Jacob found something unexpected. The passage opened into a vast chamber, larger than anything he had imagined could exist underground. The walls were covered entirely in symbols, and in the center of the chamber stood structures that were clearly made by an intelligent civilization. They were tall, geometric, and covered in the same glowing symbols. Jacob approached them carefully. The symbols were not written language. As he studied them, he realized they were mathematical. They were showing patterns and sequences. The more he looked at them, the more sense they made to his trained mind. And Aaron, moving upward through their passage, encountered their first real challenge. The path ahead was blocked by what looked like a wall of crystal-like formations. They were jutting out from the stone, sharp and gleaming in the suit lights. Drew his weapon to blast through them, but Aaron stopped him. "Wait," Aaron said. "These formations are responding to our movement. Look at how they are shifting slightly as we move." It was true. The crystals were slowly rotating and changing position, as if they were sensing the human's presence. "They are not blocking us intentionally," Aaron realized. "They are living things, or they were long ago. The radiation has changed them somehow." Lowered his weapon, "So we just walk through." "Slowly," Aaron said. "We move carefully and do not threaten them. If they are sensitive to our heat or radiation, sudden movement might trigger a defensive response." They moved forward at a crawl, pressing against the crystalline formations carefully. The crystals shifted and moved, but they did not attack. They simply adjusted to allow the humans to pass. After an hour of careful movement, Aaron emerged into a large cavern with an opening to the surface visible above. "We made it," said, relief flooding his voice. Back in the deep chamber, Jacob studied the symbols more intently. A pattern was becoming clear. There was a sequence that seemed to show the activation of some kind of machine or device. If he understood correctly, there was a chamber below this one, and in that chamber was something important. Jacob moved deeper, following the passages that the symbols seemed to indicate. The radiation levels the chamber was sealed by a massive door. Jacob approached it slowly, his suit lights revealing intricate patterns carved into the metal surface. The patterns were the same mathematical sequences he had seen in the chambers above. His training in theoretical physics had taught him how to recognize patterns in natural and artificial systems. He began to trace the sequences with his hand, feeling the grooves in the ancient metal. The first sequence showed basic mathematical operations. The second showed geometric progressions. The third showed something more complex, a representation of energy transformation and transfer. Jacob realized the door was not locked by a mechanical key. It was locked by mathematics. The ancients had believed that any intelligent species would be able to solve mathematical problems. They had designed the door to open only for those who could understand the language of numbers and logic. He began to work the problem out in his mind, writing down the solutions in the dust on the ground with a stick he found. The third sequence was the key. It showed how energy moved through a system, how radiation could be transformed into stability, how chaos could be converted into order. Jacob input the solution into a panel near the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a deep sound echoed through the chamber, like a giant awakening from a long sleep. The door began to slide open. Aaron were working their way down from the upper passages when Jacob's suit beacon came through. It was the emergency signal, the notification that he had found something significant. "He found it," said to Aaron. "He found something," Aaron corrected. "Whether it helps us is still unknown." They continued downward, following Jacob's beacon signal. The vault chamber was enormous. Jacob entered slowly, his lights revealing walls covered in written records. The symbols here were different from the mathematical patterns. These were clearly language, ancient language, language that was meant to be read and understood. In the center of the chamber stood the artifact. Jacob had expected a weapon. He had expected something that looked powerful and dangerous. Instead, he saw something beautiful. It was a device made from a metal he had never seen before, covered in crystal formations that glowed with their own internal light. The device was spherical at its core, with multiple rings rotating around it at different speeds. Each ring was covered in symbols that matched the ones on the walls. Jacob approached it slowly, reading the inscriptions on the walls as he walked. The language was old, but patterns in the symbols allowed him to piece together meaning. The people who had lived here had been advanced. They had mastered technology that allowed them to manipulate energy itself. They had built a civilization that lasted for over 50,000 years, and then they had made a mistake. They had created a weapon that used their mastery of energy. The weapon had been used in a war. The war had been devastating. It had destroyed most of the civilization and left the planet bathed in radiation. The survivors had realized what they had done, and they had created a. They had built this device to stabilize the radiation, to provide a way for anyone on the planet to survive long enough to escape. But the device required something of the operator. The inscriptions on the walls made that clear. The person who activated it would have to enter a chamber where the radiation was at its absolute strongest. The device itself would protect the operator while they worked, but the protection was not perfect. The activation would require the operator to endure more radiation than any normal being should be able to survive. Jacob understood what this meant. He would have to activate the device himself. Aaron and arrived in the vault chamber just as Jacob reached this realization. They saw the artifact and understood without being told what they were looking at. "No," said immediately, "we find another way." "There is no other way," Jacob said, his voice calm. "Look at the chamber. This device is the only thing here. The inscriptions explain it. Someone has to go in that chamber and activate it. Someone has to endure the radiation to make it work." "Then we all do it," Aaron said. "We go together, maybe together we can survive it." Jacob shook his head. "The chamber is designed for one operator. Look at the size of the entrance. Only one person can enter at a time, and the activation sequence requires knowledge of the ancient technology. I am the only one here who has studied theoretical physics and energy manipulation. I am the only one who will understand the controls." Grabbed Jacob's arm. "You will die in there, you know that. The radiation will kill you." "Yes," Jacob said. "Probably it will. But if I do not activate this device, then we'll die on the surface when the radiation storms come. You will die. Aaron will die, will die. Everyone on that shuttle will die. At least if I go in that chamber, someone survives this." Aaron turned away, walking deeper into the vault chamber. He came back carrying data collection devices. "Then we will make sure your sacrifice means something. We will gather the records here. We will take the data about this civilization and this device. The galaxy will know what you did. The humans will know what you did." Jacob nodded. He walked to the artifact and began to study the controls. They were simpler than he expected. The ancients had known that fear and pain would affect the operator's ability to think clearly. The controls were designed to be operated even in extreme conditions. "Get moving," Jacob said to an Aaron. "Head back up toward the surface passages. Try to reach. The activation will cause the radiation to shift. When it does, the stable zones will change. Use that time to escape." "How long do you need?" asked. 30 minutes, Jacob said. "The activation sequence takes 30 minutes. Once it begins, it cannot be stopped. After 30 minutes, you need to be as far away from this chamber as possible." And Aaron left reluctantly. Jacob watched them go, then turned to face the activation chamber. He removed his outer suit layer, knowing it would be burned away anyway. He took a deep breath and walked toward the chamber. The radiation inside was immediately visible, glowing and pulsing like something alive. Jacob forced himself to move forward. The pain was not yet overwhelming, but he knew it would be. He reached the control panel and began the activation sequence. Numbers appeared on the display. Commands showed in the ancient language. Jacob's knowledge of theoretical physics allowed him to understand them, to know which controls to activate and in what order. The device began to hum. The rings around the sphere began to rotate faster. The crystals on its surface began to glow brighter, and in the chamber where Jacob stood, the radiation intensified. He moved on to the next control. His hands shook, but he was still functional. His body was already, the pain was immense. Jacob felt every nerve in his body screaming. His cells were being burned from the inside by the radiation that surrounded him. The protective chamber was working, limiting the exposure, but the limit was still far beyond what a human body should endure. And yet Jacob moved. He pulled himself up from the ground using the control panel for support. His suit's indicators were going dark one by one as the systems failed. His heart rate monitor showed a pattern that should have indicated immediate death. But Jacob was still alive. His body was still functioning. He understood what was happening. The human body had never been tested like this before. The extreme stress was triggering something deep in human genetics, something that had been lying dormant since the earliest days of human evolution. His cells were adapting, not quickly enough to prevent massive damage, but fast enough to keep him alive. Jacob forced himself to move toward the chamber exit. Each step was agony, his vision blurred. His hearing became distant and muted, but he kept moving. The commands he had been given were to escape, to return to the surface to get his team out. He would not fail. On the surface, the radiation readings were changing. Watched the monitors in the shuttle, seeing the shift in the environmental data. The storms that had been building were beginning to break apart and dissipate. For the first time since the earthquake, the observer felt something like confusion. "The radiation is decreasing," he said aloud to himself. "How is that possible?" Trapped in the middle passages, felt the change immediately. The radiation levels that had been steadily increasing began to drop. Her suit systems, which had been struggling, began to stabilize. She took a careful breath and realized that something in the lower chambers had changed the entire environment of the planet. She began to move faster, climbing upward toward where and Aaron had emerged. If the radiation was decreasing, there was a chance that she could reach them, a chance that everyone could survive. And Aaron were moving through the crystalline passages when they felt the vibration. It was subtle but unmistakable. Something large and powerful was being activated deep below them. Aaron looked at and nodded. "Jacob did it," Aaron said. "Now we need to move," replied. They climbed faster, moving through the passages with urgency. Behind them, the crystalline formations continued to shift and adjust. The creatures or living crystals that inhabited these caves seemed to be responding to the change in radiation. Instead of blocking the humans, they were moving aside, creating clear paths. It was as if the planet itself was helping them escape. Jacob reached the lower passages and began to climb. His body was barely responding to his commands. His vision was almost completely gone, replaced by a kind of thermal sense where he could feel the temperature variations in the rock around him. He navigated by instinct and memory, following the path he had descended hours before. The radiation was still high. The protective chamber had stopped its work once Jacob left it. Now he was exposed to the full force of the radiation from the activating artifact. Most living things would have been dead within seconds. But Jacob had passed the point where normal biology applied. His cells were changing, adapting, becoming something more than they had been before. He found in the middle passages. She was collapsed against a wall, barely conscious. Jacob picked her up, using strength he did not know he still possessed. He had no words left to speak. His body was functioning on pure willpower and human determination. Watched from the shuttle as the radiation levels continued to decrease. The storms on the surface were breaking apart. Within an hour, the planet would be survivable for any being. Within 2 hours, it would be safe for long-term exposure. He did not understand how this had happened. He had believed the humans were going to die. He had believed their mission was futile, and yet something had changed. And Aaron emerged onto the surface just as the last of the major radiation storms broke apart. The green sky was clearing. The toxic clouds were dispersing. They ran toward the shuttle, their suits' air supplies nearly depleted. Met them at the landing ramp. He helped them inside and immediately began scanning them with the medical equipment. And Aaron were exhausted, burned, and poisoned by radiation exposure. But they were alive. "Where is Jacob?" asked. "Below," said. "He activated the artifact. He sacrificed himself to save us." Felt something he had not expected to feel. It was a kind of respect, and it troubled him. He had believed humans were weak. He had believed they could not match the capabilities of other species. And yet Jacob Pierce had gone into a chamber that would have killed any instantly and activated a device that had saved everyone. But Jacob was dead. That had to be accepted. An hour later, a signal came through. It was a personal beacon, the kind each team member carried for emergencies. Immediately scanned its location. It was coming from the cavern entrance on the surface, the one where the team had descended. "Someone is coming up," said. They waited. The green sky had almost completely cleared now. The radiation storms were gone. The planet was no longer deadly. It was almost beautiful in a barren way. And then Jacob Pierce emerged from the cavern entrance. He was burned. His suit was destroyed. His body showed signs of radiation exposure that should have been lethal. He was barely walking, moving with the uncoordinated steps of someone whose nerve system was shutting down. But he was alive. He was moving forward. He was coming back to his team. Jacob collapsed before he reached the shuttle, and Aaron ran to him. Carrying him in the medical bay of the orbital station was the most advanced human facility in this sector. It had been designed to handle injuries from industrial accidents, spaceship collisions, and combat situations. It had never been designed to treat radiation poisoning at the levels Jacob Pierce had endured. Dr. Helen, the chief medical officer, stood over Jacob's unconscious body and reviewed the scans for the 10th time. The results did not change. Jacob had been exposed to radiation levels that would have caused immediate death in any recorded case, and yet his body was still functioning. His cells were still alive. They were damaged, severely damaged, but they were healing. "It is not possible," Helen said to her assistant. "I do not have the medical framework to explain what I am seeing." She injected Jacob with powerful pain management medication and began a cellular analysis. The results made her stop and read them again. The radiation damage was extensive, but the healing rate was unprecedented. Jacob's cells were regenerating at a speed that should not exist in human biology. Helen called Captain to the medical bay. Was a big man with the bearing of someone who had spent his entire life in military service. He looked at Jacob's still form on the medical bed and shook his head. "How is he alive?" asked. "I do not know," Helen said. "His cellular regeneration is working at levels we have never recorded. It is as if his entire genetic structure was waiting for extreme stress to activate. Every system in his body is working to heal and protect itself. I have never seen anything like it." "Will he survive?" asked. "Yes," Helen said without hesitation. "I do not know how, but yes, he will survive." 3 days later, Jacob opened his eyes. Foster was sitting beside his bed when it happened. Had stayed in the medical bay nearly the entire time, refusing to leave. When Jacob's eyes opened, actually gasped. "Welcome back," said, and his voice was thick with emotion. Jacob's voice was hoarse. "Water." Poured water carefully and helped Jacob drink. It was the simplest thing, and yet it seemed to take immense effort. "How long?" Jacob asked. 3 days, said. "We were not sure if you would wake up." Jacob tried to sit up but found he did not have the strength. His body was still recovering. The radiation damage was still being healed by those mysterious cellular processes. He would need time, but he was alive, he was conscious, he had made it back. "The team," Jacob said. "Aaron." "Both alive," said. "They are recovering, has radiation sickness but mild compared to yours. Aaron has some burns but nothing permanent. Everyone made it back." Jacob closed his eyes and felt something he had not expected to feel. It was relief. It was exhaustion. It was the knowledge that everything he had done, everything he had endured had meant something. His team had survived. Watched the news of Jacob's survival spread through the orbital station. The observer had never believed it would happen. He had been so certain that Jacob would die in that chamber, and he had been so completely wrong. When entered the medical bay, Helen tried to stop him. "The patient is not yet strong enough for visitors." But Jacob heard the voice and asked for to be allowed in. The observer approached the medical bed carefully, as if Jacob might shatter if approached too quickly. "You survived," said. "Yes," Jacob replied simply. "I told the council you would die," said. "I predicted this mission would end in failure and loss of life." "You were wrong," Jacob said. "But you said what you believed, that is acceptable." Was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again. "The artifact is being studied. The data your team collected suggests that the ancient civilization reached heights of scientific understanding that no current species has matched, and they built this device not as a weapon but as a tool for salvation, a tool to save others." "Yes," Jacob said, "that is what I read in their records." "You understood that, and yet you still entered the chamber," said. "You knew you would likely die, and you chose to do it anyway. That is not logical." Jacob looked at the observer. "Humans are not always logical. We act based on loyalty to those we serve with. We make choices based on values beyond personal survival. It is one of the things that makes us different." Stood there for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. "I was wrong about your species. I understood human capabilities only through the lens of physical attributes. I did not understand human will. I did not understand that humans would choose to die for others. My species values logic and survival. We did not develop concepts like sacrifice." "That is your species' way," Jacob said. "It is not better or worse, it is just different." "Perhaps," said, "but I will tell the council what I witnessed. I will tell them that humans possess qualities that are more valuable than physical superiority. I will tell them that they were wrong to doubt you." 5 days later, Jacob was allowed to walk with assistance. He moved slowly through the corridors of the station. Crew members saluted him as he passed. They had heard the story. They knew what he had done. And Aaron were being prepared to return to their home sector, had asked to see Jacob before the ship departed. They embraced carefully, aware of his still healing body. "We will write the reports together," said. "Your story will be known. All of Earth will know what you did." "Not just me," Jacob said. "The whole team, you, Aaron, we all did this together." "But you went into that chamber," Aaron said. "You made the choice that none of us could make." Jacob looked at both of them. "I did what needed to be done. That is all. That is what humans do. We see what needs to be done and we do it. We do not calculate whether the cost is worth it. We simply act." As his team departed, Jacob stood at the observation window of the orbital station and looked down at 7. The planet was no longer deadly. The radiation had stabilized at manageable levels. The artifact that Jacob had activated would continue to slowly reduce the radiation until the planet was completely safe. The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room Jacob had ever seen. It was designed to hold representatives from every intelligent species in the known galaxy. Representatives from the, and dozens of other species sat in elevated seating, arranged in a circle. All eyes turned toward Jacob as he entered. Captain was with him. Foster stood beside him as well. They had wanted Jacob to have support when he gave his testimony. Jacob was still recovering. He walked slowly and his movements showed the strain he was still under, but his voice was strong. "I am Commander Jacob Pierce," he said. "I led the expedition to 7. I'm here to explain what happened and what we discovered." Jacob described the descent to the planet's surface. He explained how his team had worked together to solve the problems of extreme radiation and dangerous passages. He talked about the separation and the decisions that had to be made. He described finding the vault chamber and studying the ancient records. Then he came to the difficult part, the part about activating the artifact. The device required someone to enter a radiation chamber and operate controls while being exposed to dangerous levels of energy, Jacob explained. "I was the only one with the knowledge to operate the device, and I was the only one who could enter the chamber, so I entered. I activated the sequence. And yes, I survived when survival seemed impossible." A representative stood up. They were known for their superior biology and physical strength. "You say you survived radiation exposure that would kill any other species instantly. How did you accomplish this? What special training did you receive? What biological modifications were made?" Jacob shook his head. "No modifications, no special training beyond standard mission preparation. I simply endured. My body had resources I did not know it possessed. When my cells were faced with extreme stress, they adapted. I learned after the fact that human cellular regeneration can be activated under conditions of extreme trauma. It has never been tested before because no human has ever been subjected to such conditions." "So you stumbled forward through luck," they said dismissively. "One individual human survived when most would not. This proves nothing about the capability of your species as a whole." Jacob looked directly at the. "You are right. This one mission proves only that humans are more resilient than you believed, but I want to talk about the real lesson here. My team solved the problems of this mission because we think differently than other species. We did not wait for logical certainty before acting. We adapted to situations as they occurred. When communication failed, we did not give up. When paths were blocked, we found new ways. When I had to make a choice that would likely result in my death, I made it without hesitation because my team depended on it." A delegate raised his hand. They could adapt their bodies to almost any environment. "These are interesting claims, Commander, but they are individual qualities. Do you expect us to believe that all humans possess these characteristics?" "No," Jacob said honestly. "Not all humans are the same. Just as not all are identical, not all humans are identical. But the capacity for persistence, for adaptation, for choice based on values beyond personal gain, these are part of human nature. These are qualities that exist in all humans, even if they are not always activated." Stood up, the observer had returned from 7 to present his own report. "I came to this mission believing that humans were inferior to other species. I believed their only value was in simple labor and exploration of dangerous places. I was wrong." The council chambers went silent. An observer admitting error was unprecedented. I witnessed human ingenuity in solving problems, continued. I witnessed human loyalty, humans working together with willingness to die for each other, and I witnessed human moral courage. Commander Pierce made a choice based not on logic but on values. His team depended on him. The people on the shuttle depended on him. The galaxy depended on him, and he made the choice that would save others, even knowing it would cost his life. This is not a quality I fully understand. But it is a quality that other species do not possess. So what are you suggesting? Asked a representative from the council leadership. That we grant humanity expanded exploration rights, that we acknowledge them as equal partners in galactic affairs. I am suggesting, said carefully, that we stop treating humans as subjects to be tested and start treating them as colleagues. I am suggesting that human qualities are valuable, even if they are different from our own. And I am suggesting that the survival of Commander Pierce and his team proves that humans are more capable than we have given them credit for. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued that one mission proved nothing. Others suggested that human unpredictability made them unsuitable for important positions. But the tide of opinion was shifting. By the end of the session, the council had made its decision. Humans would be granted expanded exploration rights. The dangerous sectors that had been restricted to other species would now be open to human teams. Jacob Pierce would be promoted and given command of a larger exploration force, and the knowledge from Seven would be shared with all species, with human scientists given prominent roles in the study of the ancient civilization. After the session ended, approached Jacob with a smile on his face. You did it. You changed the way the galaxy looks at us. Jacob shook his head. I did not do anything except survive. The real change came from my team working together, from Aaron understanding the ancient technology, from staying calm under impossible conditions, from you fighting through the crystalline passages when it would have been easy to give up. That is what the council realized. They realized humans are not alone in being capable. Humans are capable together. 3 months later, Jacob was back on a ship heading toward another dangerous sector. This time, he led a larger team. The mission was to explore what was called the Dead Zone, a region of space where stations had been lost and no communication had ever been successfully established. Before departure, Jacob stood with Aaron and in the observation lounge looking out at the stars. Another suicide mission, said with a small smile. Another mission where no one thinks we can survive, Aaron added. But we will survive, said confidently, because we are humans. Jacob nodded. We will survive because we work together, because we think in ways that other species do not, because when something needs to be done, we do it. Even when it might kill us, asked. Especially then, Jacob said, because that is what humans do. We are not the strongest, we are not the fastest, we are not the most logically perfect, but we are willing to face impossible odds and walk forward anyway. That is humanity, that is what makes us valuable. The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. Jacob watched as the familiar spaces of normal dimension disappeared, replaced by the strange patterns of accelerated space travel. Ahead of them lay danger and uncertainty. But Jacob Pierce and his team would face it, just as humans had always faced the unknown. Not because they were guaranteed to survive, not because they were the best or the strongest, but because someone had to face the danger. And humans, it had become clear, were willing to answer that call. The story of Jacob Pierce and Seven would spread through the galaxy. It would be told to their young, to show them that not all strength comes from biology. It would be told to remind them that adaptation is not always the most important quality. It would be told to demonstrate that logic must sometimes yield to values and principles. And on Earth, humans would hear the story and understand something that perhaps they had always known. That humanity was not measured by physical superiority or perfect logic. Humanity was measured by courage, by sacrifice, by loyalty, and by the simple willingness to face the darkness and walk forward anyway. That was what it meant to be human, and that was what the galaxy had finally come to understand. Scientists from a dozen species were already preparing expeditions to study the ancient ruins. The vault chamber would be carefully examined. The knowledge of the ancient civilization would be shared with all the intelligent species of the galaxy. And at the center of it all was the fact that a human named Jacob Pierce had survived what should have been unsurvivable. He had done the impossible, and in doing so, he had changed how the entire galaxy looked at his species. Medical scanners immediately began analyzing his condition. The results were impossible. Jacob Pierce should have been dead. Every measurement said so. Every medical protocol indicated that he could not possibly be alive. And yet his heart was still beating. His brain was still functioning. His cells were still somehow adapting and healing themselves. Stared at the medical readouts, unable to process what he was seeing. He had been wrong about human weakness, wrong about human capability, wrong about everything. And somehow that felt important. To respond to the radiation. He felt his cells burning, breaking down, trying desperately to repair themselves. But the device was protecting him, holding the radiation at a level he could survive for now. Jacob input the final sequence. The artifact blazed with light. The hum became a deep vibration that shook the entire chamber. Above ground, the radiation storms would be beginning to break apart. Below ground, the radiation was stabilizing, no longer growing more intense. Jacob collapsed to his knees. His suit was showing signs of complete system failure. His radiation count was beyond measurement. He had done it. He had activated the device. Now he just had to find a way out. To drop as he descended. That was good. It meant he was moving in the right direction. Whatever had been built here, it had been designed to protect against radiation. That meant there was a source of the radiation somewhere, and the ancients had built protection against it. As Jacob pushed forward into the darkness, he did not know that above him and Aaron had found safety. He did not know that was somewhere in the middle passages, slowly making her way through damaged corridors. All Jacob knew was that there was an answer below him, and he was going to find it, no matter what he had to endure to reach it. His suit's power indicator showed he had 3 hours of air remaining. His heart rate monitor showed elevated stress. His radiation counter was clicking steadily. But Jacob Pierce did not stop. He did not look back. He descended deeper into 7, following the mathematical symbols of a dead civilization toward a secret that had waited thousands of years to be discovered. When the tremor came, it was sudden and violent. The ground shook beneath their feet, throwing them off balance. In the distance, a massive section of the landscape collapsed inward, revealing a dark opening below. The radiation levels spiked dramatically. Jacob looked at the opening, then back at his team. "There, that is our way in." His voice came through the communication system. "Jacob, the radiation is off the charts down there. If we go in, there is no coming back out the same way." "Then we find another way," Jacob said, moving toward the opening. "But we are going in." Aaron and followed without hesitation. Only paused for a moment, looking back at the shuttle and safety, then forward into the darkness and danger. She followed her commander into the underground caverns of 7, knowing that whatever waited below would test them in ways they could never have imagined.